Welcome to the Recruiting Stories podcast, where we celebrate recruiting by exploring the stories of leaders and top performers by digging into their stories and understanding how recruiting has impacted their journey and their success. All right, everybody, welcome to the Recruiting Stories podcast, powered by Cover 3 Consulting. I'm thrilled to have our guest today, Justin Liu. He's a founder and CEO of Ezpapel. Justin, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I appreciate you being on and taking some time to talk with the Recruiting Stories podcast and just the transportation industry. Think you'll have just a unique story. Love your content, by the way. Love your posts, man. I think those are great. Hopefully we can talk a little bit about some of those. But what if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about Ezpapel. Just the 1 minute version of how you got into that and what you guys do.
Yeah, Ezpapel is essentially Shopify for trucking. It's pretty much we convert traditional legacy trucking companies into a digital company equipped with technology, right? Rather than manually doing a lot of tasks, now we allow AI to automate all the repetitive tasks that you do. And how I got into the industry, it's funny, actually. I'm a second generation trucker. My dad was a driver his pretty much the entire life, and he was running about 1 to 3 trucks. Growing up, seeing what he had to do, right? It's a lot of many work, and I decided to join him to help him grow the company so that he can retire early. And my timeline for me working for him was 3 years. I was 25 at the time. I was at 28. That's my perfect time. 3 years. Help my dad scale and retire. But as you know the saying, once you get into logistics, you never get out.
That's right.
So I stuck in the industry and I loved everything. And there's a lot of challenges. Like I mentioned earlier, there's not really a tool for him to run the business for him. We were running, hundreds of loads every week, but we're relying on spreadsheet. And I couldn't really find a tool to automate that. And we're literally hiring manpower to manually enter information by brute force. So I decided to use my skill in coding and developing software to automate the whole thing. So the first version of Ezpapel was actually from my dad's trucking company to help him scale the business. And with the tool, we scaled from 3 trucks to 50 trucks and about $1 million revenue to $20 million revenue in 3 years. And I still stick with the timeline, 3 years. And I'm out. So 3 years after helping him scale the business, I went full time into the spin-off product, Ezpapel.
Man, that is incredible. And we're just jumping right into your recruiting story, which is fantastic. I love that Ezpapel is born out of like a real problem that trucking companies have. I think that's beautiful because that's when the most, the best solutions come out of that I've seen, best companies. So to loop back just briefly, your dad has been in trucking your whole life?
Yeah, he was driving because he spent half his life in China. Even when I think legal age was driving maybe around 18 or 21. So he started driving the moment he could get a driver license. So he was a driver. He ran a trucking company. Even in China back then, he ran a pretty decent sized company in China. After moving to the U.S., immigrants want to make a good living for the family. There's a lot of money without speaking the language very well. And when you get into trucking,
that's awesome. So it's a part of you. It's a part of who you are. So your dad technically is the one who recruited you into logistics and transportation. Did you see yourself getting into logistics prior?
It's a funny question that you asked. My dad, technically, he kind of pulled me in, but he was kind of the first person. Growing up, I didn't know what I wanted to do. It's like but I did know that I did not want to do trucking.
Right. Yeah.
But as I got older, my first job out of college, I was working for Amazon. My first internship and first job with Amazon, we were working in inbound, receiving work with trucks a lot. Trucks will be late for delivery. Amazon warehouse operations, 2 days delivery. If we're not having visibility over them, then we cannot do the job. So it got kind of chaotic where it's like, hey, where the heck is this trailer? We have no visibility over them. And then that got me interested. Hey, let me look into industry, why this is so archaic. Then when I found out it's almost $1 trillion industry, no one really doing anything for truckers, carriers, and my dad wasn't alone being a dinosaur in the industry. 97% of the people are just like him, pen, paper, spreadsheet. So yeah.
Well, so that brings me to the next question, because obviously I work with a bunch of logistics companies, brokers, trucking companies, transportation tech companies. Why does it seem that transportation specifically seems to be such a dinosaur industry and behind the times when it comes to something like technology? Because you look at other industries, like I think about med tech, for instance, and I'm like, there's some super advanced things happening in med tech or dentistry and things like that. And so some sectors are like, man, they're super advanced. But why is one that you think should be advanced? Why is it not, in your opinion?
Well, a couple of things, like you mentioned earlier, right? The best product to solve a problem is a founder-led problem, right? Founder facing the problem. In trucking, I actually had a conversation with someone about this not long ago. Why are we so archaic? Why are we so old? And what we came out with is trucking is not a sexy industry, not like bio or med, right? People want to get, I'm a bio major. When I graduate, I want to do that. There's no one going to college after I graduate. I'm going to be in the truck industry. Right? So most people in this industry, there's a statistics. Every 1 in 5 drivers are immigrated. Around 33% of the people in the industry are veterans. And what do these people have in common? They're not tech savvy. Immigrants, a lot of them don't even speak the language very well, not mentioning bringing technology innovation to the industry. So they're used to running things the old way. And there's the outside world. If you talk about Silicon Valley, if we talk about the people who do innovation, they don't know what problems trucking have. So I feel like there's a gap between the two. There's no communication. If it wasn't for my dad, I wouldn't be, innovating inside trucking, trying to bring innovation to it. And because he introduced me to this industry, that's why I was able to learn the problem and fix it. So I'm sure there's a lot of people who are problem solvers, but they just don't know the problems that we have in trucking, which is why we're about 10 to 20 years behind in technology.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think I definitely resonate with the idea of like there's a gap between the industry as it is or has been, or maybe the boots on the ground, and then potentially the people with the ability to innovate quickly. And someone like yourself obviously is closing that gap, which I think is incredible. In that process with your dad, I mean, were there ever moments where you're just like, man, this is so archaic. Just walk me through all the things that you have trouble with. Like, did that happen? Like, sit across the table and just let me list all this stuff down, or
all the time. I'll give you one example. One example is when I helped my dad run the trucking business, the drivers will be on the road for about 7 to 10 days, and they will come back. So they will run several loads in the process, right? But the biggest challenge is drivers just give you the worst quality paperwork, POD, proof of delivery. When they get it to you, it's either blurry, missing a corner, or it's just not, you cannot use it to bill your customer. A lot of times what we end up happening was we wait for the driver to come back a week or two later, and then we manually scan every paperwork one by one, and then drag it to a folder, drag it to email, bill our customer. Right. This is one of the ways that give me one of the most headache. I believe a lot of people are still having this today is unable to get that high quality picture, which is why I kind of, when we build this tool, I had this in mind. I got to build in a scanner, AI scanner within the mobile driver app right after delivery. I want this tool to assist driver take a perfect quality picture, send right back to the system without driver even knowing what they just did. Right. In a click or two. So yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. It seems like anything that that the lower the bar to accomplish a task, the better when it comes to technology these days, which you see a lot of like high level companies, your Apples, your Googles, those types of things. Like I am at Amazon, like I can click a button and something shows up on my door tomorrow. Yes. Like because I've got all my information in there. You know what I mean? Like literally like one click, it's the same idea, which I think is incredible. So, okay. So that being said, if you wouldn't have gone into logistics, obviously your dad helped pull you in there. What did you want? Where do you think you would have been?
I've been a problem solver my entire life, and at heart I'm an entrepreneur. And if it wasn't for trucking, I think I would have gone to consulting to solve problems for other companies.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. I could see that for you as well. So let's talk about then Ezpapel and maybe that product and the solution that you are building now as well, because I'd love to hear a little bit more about it, because you mentioned it being like the Shopify for trucking. And, I've followed your posts. If you haven't, go follow Justin or connect with him on LinkedIn. His content is great. But, heard you on other podcasts, read your post. You've talked about obviously solving the problem of capturing a POD, request for detention, geofencing. Tell me a little bit about how Ezpapel solves those problems and how it's helpful for obviously trucking companies, then potentially things for brokers as well.
100%. So Ezpapel really bring the technology to the industry. There's two parts to it. The first part is if you look up a truck, if you drive on the freeway, you see a lot of trucks, but the problem is most time you recognize Amazon trailer, but you don't really recognize the trucking company, because 97% of trucking companies in the US have 20 trucks or less. So they're very small companies. Those companies don't really have a website built. How can you build a reputation and credibility if you don't even have a website? So that's the first part we're tackling is Ezpapel will help trucking companies build a front-end website in a couple of clicks where you can build that credibility and online presence for your customers. And then the second part is a back-end software. The back-end software is where you run your entire operation, your compliance. If DOT or CHP or anyone comes on your door, knocking your door for audit, you don't panic. Have everything in one place, organized, presented to them, right? Maintenance. How do you keep your vehicles all in one place? Maintenance record in one place, and on top of that, how do you run your operations, right? Data entry. How do you eliminate that? Every company is having multiple touches on data entry for the same thing, right? How do we eliminate that? Ezpapel allows them to eliminate the multiple touches, multiple data entries. You only do it once, or even you don't even have to do it. Our system will recognize it, do the entry for you, and where you communicate with your driver on one end. Geofencing. The technology hasn't been around for a long time. It just been adopted in trucking yet. Is brokers, shippers always calling, texting, emailing carriers all day nonstop. Most of them even hire offshore team so that they can keep track of those update. They're tracking drivers, they're not tracking equipment. If driver is outside the truck, you're tracking the wrong target. So geofencing is we allow the freight to be tracking equipment rather than the driver. When the equipment arrives at pickup, and send an alert to everybody involved, letting them, hey, your person has arrived. This person has a departure, right? Because we know that radius of the location where they're heading to. So this requires no human touch. You don't need driver to click on anything. The moment they arrive, boom, captures, hey, this person has arrived. It solves your accessory problem as well. Is my carrier lying to me that he arrived at 2 p.m. at appointment time? Oh, and then shipper told me that this carrier was arrived at 2:30 instead of 2. What proof does the carrier have? Right? All those argument conflict goes away. You don't need a team to track it, email, phone call, system automatically trigger that. So geofencing fixes that problem and giving everybody the visibility where the truck, where the load is, and when it's getting empty. All that status update goes away with that. And then we mentioned about geofencing. We mentioned about data entry, managing everything, POD, paperwork processing, all those stuff that probably about your 70 to 80% of the time doing that. Now technology can take care of that. So you can spend those 80% of the time finding better new customers, bigger deals, rather than spending time doing tasks that give you no return. Now you can use this time to focus on things that might generate you thousands, hundreds of new deals for your company so that you can scale.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's something I hadn't thought about, but you mentioned at the beginning, even something as simple as a website. And that sounds so crucial because I think about a different example, right? But similar idea is like, typically if I, do business with anybody, one of the first things I do is we'll check out their website, right? Or even if let's just say, I'm looking for restaurants around me in a new location. Well, I'm typically looking at the website. I want to see what's on the menu. I want to see, how many ratings they have and all that.
100%.
It's like, yeah. So it's like that. It makes all the sense in the world to be able to say, hey, let's go ahead and modernize that for you. And then to create a back end that's, a system that puts it all in one place. Like what a convenient solution for them. What do you find is like a barrier for people? Is it just the idea of like, oh man, I have to use technology now versus, hey, I've done this in the past?
One biggest barrier is probably the resistance to adopt technology, right? It's like they're not used to change, and they a lot of carriers, smaller carriers, what they have is they care too much. They're too focused, too busy on working rather than saving time. They want to make money. A lot of times they don't realize that when you're saving time, you're also making money. They care about, hey, I just care about who can give me loads. I don't care about software. I don't care about technology. So I think it's the perspective on the future. How can you do things that 99% of your competitors are not doing yet to give you the advantage? I think the biggest barrier is probably the resistance to change.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I think about it, and I mean, this better than anybody, is, driver recruiting is like one of the most difficult things in the world. Yeah. I mean, it's just super high turnover rates and all of that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, it would make sense for, a small trucking company as an owner to say, if I can implement something like this that makes things simpler, it makes it easier for my driver, it saves them time, that you should be able to say, hey, I can recruit better drivers because I've got a system and a technology where we're not having to do things, like we did in 1970. Is that true? Or
Definitely. You have a better management of drivers. So with technology, your drivers won't be receiving calls from not just you, from customers and brokers all day. And secondly, is driver payroll management. A lot of companies right now, a lot of them still pay by check. So the drivers don't really know how much they're making. And then a lot of time drivers, I'm not making money here. I'm leaving and I'm going somewhere else. I'm like, wait a minute. Let's say John's putting a resignation letter. I'm like, wait a minute. Let's pull up your record, right? So you made, $8,000 last month. What's your goal, right? Are we hitting that goal? Right. Yep. Right away, drivers can see that. With technology, they're able to see all their payment history inside their mobile app, how much they're making, and all of their record, even their t-shirt size, something as small as a t-shirt size. You're giving them a t-shirt size. You don't need to call them every time. It's in the system, right? All those small things are in the system that drivers feel they can better communicate to the team. They don't get bothered a lot. Drivers don't like to be bothered. Give me instruction on what to do, right? If you pay well, respect me, I'm not going to leave. Drivers, as high as a driver turnover, drivers don't actually want to leave, find a new job. It's just that the employer might not be providing them what they promised to them in the first place.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Cover 3, we don't currently do driver recruiting. I've done it in the past, but I would say the drivers that I've spoken with, to your point, like they don't actually really want to go somewhere else if they don't have to, right? Like that's not something that they're like constantly looking to do. But the other thing that you mentioned is like, if you're constantly like bombarding them with phone calls and updates, like most drivers I know and have spoken to, like they didn't sign up to be a customer service rep, right? Like that's not the job that they wanted. Like they're like, hey, I would rather, like, I want to drive. I want to pick up and drop off. I want to do a good job, the good ones, right? And of course, communicate as needed. But like, I don't want to be on the phone all the time
Oh
dealing
yeah.
with
Oh
customers,
yeah.
right? And this helps eliminate a lot of that.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, cool, very good. Well, that's awesome. I love that. I think the billing and driver pay, I think, is something that is a big help too, because as you mentioned, right? If I think you said weekly pay, and does this work with like factoring companies as well?
Yes, we have a factoring company that we partner up with. So what happens is you don't have to go on their own login portal where you don't have to email them. The moment where a driver turns in, you approve it, it goes automatically to your factoring partner, and then
Yeah,
so that eliminate another process of you having to have extra clicks.
cool, awesome. Yeah, that's good. Well, appreciate you sharing all of that. Sounds like an amazing product, like an all inclusive product, right? And service that can solve a lot of problems. I wanted to pivot real quick, just because I appreciate, again, go back to some of your posts. You've had some really good insights on just like the economy and how the trucking industry kind of functions within that. Seeing as where we are, right, and trucking being kind of a cyclical industry, right? Where do you what are trucking companies right now feeling, I guess, in the moment that we're in, and maybe where do you think rates are going to go in the next, 3 6 months? Do you have any insight or thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah, that's something like I personally think a lot of carriers are right now they're very some smaller carriers are going out of business, and in mid-size,
Mhm.
the smaller carriers are actually struggling to stay afloat. And right now, we're still seeing the average spot market rate to be around a little over $2.
Mhm.
Even contract rate is getting below $3.
Right.
And I personally think we haven't hit the rock bottom yet. I think the
Mhm.
bottom will probably be around 180 per
Mhm.
mile,
Yeah.
and then we're still around a little over $2 per mile right now. So there's still a couple month of a rate dropping to the rock bottom,
Mhm.
and carriers a lot of times, like for those who are prepared, what I often preach in trucking is, like as you mentioned earlier as well, it's a cycle, right? Every few years, the cycle demand depends on supply and demand goes up and down. So in trucking, it's much easier to predict the cycle compared to the stock market, because we know once enough carriers go out of business, the scale tips, the market will flip again. So for
Mhm.
now, like my favorite saying is, be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful.
Yeah.
Every time throughout this cycle, we see it over and over again. Carriers, you see them buying 200,000 plus trucks. That's probably worth 150, right? Those are the
Mhm.
ones going out of business. Why? Because they were greedy when the market is good. Now they're kind of in this position where, what do I do now, right? There's
Mhm.
another type of people. If you've been in business long enough, now when others are fearful, you got to be greedy. Now it's a
Mhm.
time to pick up some discounted equipment. Trucking price went skyrocketed. What, beginning of this year and last year? It's all over the news. But now those have come back to normal, or even going below the market rate. I expect the trucking price to, especially the used ones, to keep going down. So the next couple of months, January, February, March will probably be the perfect time to buy some equipment if you have enough cash saved. And I don't expect the rate to pick up probably until Q2 or Q3 of next year. And that's when more carriers will go out of business. Right now, everyone's still trying to, we're seeing some carriers exiting the business, but a lot are still trying to hold on to it, right? Hold on to, I'm not
Mhm.
exiting, I'm trying to stay afloat. But with the rate keep dropping, they're not going to stay, and the market will flip again.
Yeah, it seems like consumer demand has like kept up enough that it's kept a lot of people in the game. But if you have those rates drop at the same time, and you add in, hey, I'm also highly leveraged, right? If we're too leveraged, it's at some point, your wires get crossed, and that's typically when you see those smaller trucking companies or those overly leveraged trucking companies go out of business,
Definitely agree.
unfortunately.
Definitely agree.
Obviously, though, something like Ezpapel would allow people to say, "Hey, let's save some money in a process like that," right? And one thing I noticed on your website I thought was great was you have a calculator that will allow people to say, "Hey, let's go look at how many drivers do we have? How many trucks, how many loads do we have?" And that can help give us an idea, a rough number of maybe what what we could save. I think that's a great tool. If you haven't, go check out their website. I think that's a great way to do it. And I'd also echo your sentiments too on from a talent standpoint too. Be greedy when others are fearful. I love the Buffett quote because certainly, man, I know a lot of people slow down or lay off right in a moment like this. Obviously, that's a great time to pick up talent. Not just maybe those who were laid off, whether that's a driver or a tech company or what have you, but when people start to slow down, that's a great time. People are keeping their eyes open suddenly to say like, hey, what else is out there? And typically from a economic standpoint, if you think of a boom market, everything's overpriced. and like you said, trucks are overpriced. Oftentimes candidates are overpriced too, right? I mean, they're asking for crazy amounts of money. Well, right now we're in a place where that's not the case, right? You can get, in my opinion, like you can get a great value for an employee because I think your temperaments and expectations are a little bit lower, and people aren't saying, hey, I'm asking for the moon and the stars, and that's going to be good value.
100%.
We can win to the next boom. So
definitely
for sure. Well, cool, man. Kind of to move towards wrapping up, I appreciate you being so generous with your time and your thoughts. And kind of thinking back through your journey, right? Like you helping build your dad's company, I think is such a cool story, right? Like you having to be like, man, I did boots on the ground. I did every part of the business, kind of had to like put your hands in it and learn before you jumped out onto your own thing. Through that process or just kind of your own journey, are there any books that you've read at any point in time that were really influential or helpful for you?
Yes. I'm not a big on books, but they're definitely life-changing books that really made me think the way how I think now. There are 3 books that I would recommend everybody who in any industry that if you want to become an entrepreneur or just grow your side business. The first one is called Disciplined Entrepreneurship. It's written by Bill Aulet, the MIT, a really famous and well-known guy from MIT. A lot of big companies are running their entrepreneur program with his book principle, literally talking about talking to your customer and the steps, really tell you step by step, how do you build your company? 24 steps laid out, follow them. So that's a great book that really helped me to grow my dad's company, to grow Ezpapel so far. And the second book is How to Win Friends and Influence Others. This is pretty well known. A lot of people know this, been around for a long time. It really teach you the principle. How do you network with people? How do you make people like you, right? If you don't know what to say, this book will teach you, hey, say this to get on people's good side. And the last one is called The E-Myth Revisited. This is a perfect book for every small business. It will tell you why small business don't work and why most small businesses fail and what to do about it. It's a perfect analogy between sled dogs, right? You have a sled dog versus an ox. Which one do you think will bring more? 5 or 10, a pack of sled dogs versus one ox, they may be able to pull the same weight. Small business owners are often the ox. They're trying to do everything themselves, not leveraging the scaling by hiring people. They're trying to do everything. Versus sled dogs, they got a group of people with one mission, right? Trying to pull the sled. So I think these 3 books, if you want to scale your business, run your business, go really, how do I go from a small business to to scale to enterprise level? I think these 3 books will lay out the blueprint for everybody.
Man, I love I love all of those. I haven't read the first one, Win Friends and Influence People. I've read that one. And then the E-Myth is a great book. I would echo that one. So we'll put those in the show notes for everybody to take a look at. So cool. That's great. And then typically kind of one of my final questions is, obviously part of your journey going into entrepreneurship. I love it because, being an entrepreneur myself, I always love talking to others. But what advice would you give yourself, your 20-year-old self, I guess, kind of like looking back now where you are today?
I think when I was 20, I've been an entrepreneur myself. 20, I was in college. I was flipping textbooks, buying them
Mm,
at the end of a quarter system for 20
mm,
bucks and sell them for like 150 or $200
mm.
2 weeks
Nice.
later when the quarter starts.
Yeah.
But at the time, I didn't know that was part of entrepreneurship. I didn't know that everyone is capable of starting a business regardless what experience you have. So if there's any advice I would give my 20-year-old self is don't be afraid to start early. If you think
Mm,
that you have an idea, go for it and reach out to people for help. There's a lot of people, actually genuine people who have done in the past. They're willing to share their wisdom and passing it on to you, right? Pick their brain and go out there by talking to your customers and start doing it. If your passion really is in start your own business and don't be afraid to get started. It's never too early to start.
that's so good, and it feels so heavy and so like big and hard before you start something, but it's also the best education that you can ever get. And I mean, I always tell folks it's hard to consider I'd ever do anything else. Now that I've taken that plunge. Well,
100%.
I want to share one of your posts that I think is gold for both. It's about starting a trucking company, and then and I'll try to include this in the video if I can too. I'll try to paste it in there. But I think it's great for business as well. So I'm going to just read it real quick. And it says, Justin posted, he said, if I were to start a trucking company from scratch, here are 5 things I would do. That 1, identify a niche. The smaller, the better. 2, interview 3 to 5 small customers and figure out what their top 3 pains are with their current truckers. 3, leverage technology to build a digital trash hauling company. I use trash as the niche that solve the 3 pains with the innovation. 4, with the customer's approval, turn them into cheerleaders so they can introduce you to more customers and be references to landing bigger ones. And 5, build a mission-driven team to become the biggest trash hauler to make the earth a trash free and keep innovating. I love that because I think first and foremost, like they always say, the riches are in the niches. That's so good. Then not being afraid to reach out to people and figure out like, what's actually the problem is so crucial. It's how I ended up in the transportation industry as well, when it comes to recruiting and supply chain. And then, ultimately saying, okay, let's then use those people as well, create some raving fans if we can, right? Solve a problem for them, and then more people will come and follow because they'll be willing to say, hey, Justin does a great job. I'd love to introduce you to, so on and so forth. So all that to say, great. Anything that you have to add to that? I think it was great post. It applies obviously to trucking, but to business as well.
Definitely. That's exactly the framework that I follow for every business that I did, for my dad's trucking company, for Ezpapel right now. And those framework pretty much came from my personal experience and the book Discipline Entrepreneurship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the knowledge I've learned from here and really kind of applied to real life, adding my own perspective to it. So you thank you for sharing that, and definitely it's applicable to every business that you want to start. One is talk to your customer, figure out their pain, fix it, and then ask them for a deposit, and then build the problem, build the product, and then find a few more customers to be your cheerleaders. And now you either go for VCs for funding, or if you're bootstrapping, just find more customers, leveraging those reviews that you have.
Yeah. I think that's well said and well stated. I talk to brokers a ton, or transportation tech companies, and oftentimes part of that conversation is like, hey, we've got one of the questions I ask is like, well, tell me about the customers that you serve, and they end up telling me most of the time about a niche. And so a broker as an example, they're like, oh well, we actually do a ton of auto parts, moves. And I'm like, okay, well, how'd you get into that? Right. And then the deeper we go, I realize, man, they got a ton of like knowledge and and industry information. And I'm just like, go use that, right? Go solve that problem 100 more times, right? And you're going to make a ton of money. But I think sometimes it's easy to be like, the world is so big and there's so many other things that can distract you. I'm like, go kill it in one area, in one niche, and become just an absolute expert before you dive into, something else. So
I love what you said, and it applies to trucking owners as well. They're such, domain experts in what they do. It's because the reason why some of them are not thinking about turning that niche into a business, because they're too busy thinking about how to manually do everything without relying on technology. So they don't have time to think about what they can potentially do. So best advice is leverage technology to do things that you're doing manually, so that you can have more time. You can slow down so that you can think bigger and think more about what you can do with it.
Yep, that's good. I was a college football athlete. I had a coach. He was like, Chapman, like, you always get paralysis by analysis. He's like, just play football, man. Like, and then that's what you want, is you just want people to be able to play ball and do what they're great at, and not be slowed down by the processes or the rules or the regulations or what have you. Like the more, and I mean, it's part of why I named my company Cover 3, is like, it's a simple coverage in football. And if you can just line people up and give them the tools so they can play fast and do what they're great at, I mean, you're going to win. You're going to win.
Definitely.
So, well, cool. Justin, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate it. If people want to get in touch with you, learn more about Ezpapel, what should they do?
2 places they can go to. One is on LinkedIn, like you mentioned, search Justin Liu, Ezpapel. Follow me, connect with me. I'd love to answer any question you have. Second is go on our website, www.ezpapel.ai, and you can sign up for a demo. We'll love to show a demo to see if it's a good fit for your company.
Cool. Justin, thanks for your time, man.
Thank you. Great to be on the show.
Thanks for listening to the Recruiting Stories podcast. If you haven't yet, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on LinkedIn. Adrian Chapman and Cover 3 Consulting is our company page. Also check out our website, www.cov3consulting.com. Again, thanks for joining us, and we just simply want to remind you that you can change the world by putting people in a position where they can do the most good, and you do that by recruiting. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.